My mother passed away some years ago, and I had the most difficult time with it. It's not easy losing someone that was always there. It's like losing a part of yourself. When it goes, it takes something from you. The rest of your life is but an attempt to find that piece again, like buying a new dog after your ancient Maltese finally kicks the bucket. It just never works. We're often left with unfinished words. Maybe we couldn't say goodbye, or maybe we're left with questions unanswered. That's the ditch I was digging in. If only I could speak to my mother one last time, say goodbye, ask her how she was, wherever she was. That's when I found a medium that could do just that. Her name was Daughter Alba, a French-Canadian on a visa here in the US. She was a stone's throw away, thank God. I couldn't be happier to meet her. She was staying in a camper out by Yellowstone National Park, and I, being from Idaho Falls, only had a couple hours drive. I wasn't a believer growing up. I often scolded religious folk and labeled them fanatics and fools. I didn't believe in ghosts nor mediums either, but tragedy and trauma often starve us of reason, seeking answers beyond our limits of understanding. I was vulnerable and willing to try something I'd never previously considered. I'll cut to the chase. When I arrived, we exchanged hellos, spoke briefly while she finished watering various plants, then made our way up the steps into her home, where the lighting was dim, sitting down to a black cloth draped over a table with a blood-red wax candle and a planchette in the center. She lit a flame. Looking into my eyes, sensing my unease, she asks, "Are you ready?" She took my hands into hers, soft but cold, her nails resting on my palms as she gripped tightly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. I often crack jokes in hard times. Call me cynical, but it lightens the mood. She asked me to close my eyes, to imagine my mother as I last remembered her. Her image was as vivid as ever, like she never left. The trace of her silhouette, the wrinkles in her smile, everything. I could never forget her. My biggest fear was that eventually I would. It began to storm. The rain began to fog my thoughts. I couldn't think clearly. The images began to blur. Alba began to speak. "Someone is with us." The air got colder, and the feeling of a presence surrounded me. My arms turned to goose flesh, the hairs pinned up. Alba spoke again. "The being is proclaiming to know you. I cannot see its face. It seems afraid." She spoke again, but to the dead. "How do you know us? We're looking for a woman, Mrs. Flander." The table began to vibrate, following a series of percussive bangs on the camper door. Alba craned her neck in a whiplashing speed, a petrified look of horror that made the hairs stand on the nape of my neck. I wasn't comfortable any more than she. This was wrong, all wrong. I shouldn't have come here. "What is your name, spirit?" she yelled, looking at the door. The rain stopped, the sound of solemn silence. There was a whistle, a tune unrecognizable coming from outside. Alba let go of my hands and placed hers on my shoulders. She looked even more terrified. "You need to leave," she said. "Are you a psychopath? I'm not going out there." I didn't plan on leaving the camper until she told me what was going on. "What's happening, Alba?" She began to light every candle inside. Then she started burning sage and traced it along the windows and the door. She'd yet to answer my question, and I was pissed off. But before I could say anything else, the tablecloth ripped from the table, spilling the candle with it, but leaving the planchette. It started to carve into the exposed table, a screeching agony likened to nails on a chalkboard. I covered my ears and watched it. When it was finished, Alba screamed. Scribed in some ancient handwriting I didn't understand, symbols and letters covered the table. Alba became unrecognizable, unresponsive when I looked to her and said her name. She walked to a drawer in the kitchen and brandished a knife, mesmerized by the reflection of herself on the blade. I stood frozen. She took the knife and stabbed it in her eye, prying and digging at it until it fell from its socket and hung from her head. A look of pleasure came to her, and she started to whistle. the same tune we heard coming from outside the camper door. Without consideration, I ran for the door, more afraid of what was happening inside than what was outside the camper. The sky was green, and there was the absence of any sound, as if the world died. No birds sung, not even the leaves on the ground crunched under my feet as I ran to the car. I couldn't even hear myself breathing. Putting the car in drive, I peeled out of her driveway without looking back. We tend to think more when we're alone, whether it be when we're in the shower or in our room late at night, listening to the patter of the rain against our window. We often think about life, mistakes, triumphs, our future. A question that comes eventually to almost every young mind searching for meaning in a chaotic world is, how did we end up here? If you're religious or an atheist, you've already got an answer. You might quote the book of Genesis from the Holy Bible, or you might recount Brahma and the lotus flower, or nothing at all, just randomness, order from chaos. And that's just a grain of sand compared to the great dune that is the universe. Beliefs across a spectrum of philosophy that transcend cultures, some that have persisted for thousands of years, longer than Christianity or Hinduism itself. Some darker, more gripping than you could ever have conceived. Here I introduce you to the tribe of Vinu, discovered from remains found in an 8,000-year-old cave in the flatlands of Cameroon. And this is their creation story. The world as they know it, the universe, time, served no general purpose, adhered to no God, and no moral compass. That's not to say that it didn't serve one. Beyond time, according to them, is a place of macabre origin, a place of darkness, in a literal sense, true darkness. Have you ever been in true darkness, suffered delusions, on the verge of insanity from the sound of your blood pumping around your ears? It would make one go mad. That was what was said of the people who resided in this dark, forsaken dungeon, the Dark Ones. They went mad from their own eternal suffering, and with it came the first spark, or as science proclaims, the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe. But this wasn't exactly true. Have you ever thought to wonder that a god could have just hung the stars in the sky and just made it look like it appeared to have been around for a while? It all happened in an instant. Humans are their spawn. They are our genesis. We didn't evolve. The beginning of life wasn't from some primordial soup where a few building blocks arranged in happenstance to race us to where we are now. It all happened in an instant. It's said the Dark Ones afflicted the universe with life like their very own. Us, you and I, only to infect it with suffering. I'd ask my mother why God would let babies die. She said God just worked in mysterious ways, to have faith. I summed it up more simply to him just not caring. And with that, I realized that maybe he didn't exist at all. But you see, suffering is a gift, but not for us, according to the Vinu. It's a gift for them. Our suffering gives their life meaning. We've all heard the saying, misery loves company, and who better than them? According to the Vinu, death, disease, war, famine, poverty, the list stacks to the moon, are nothing but trivialities to them. We are governed with ferocity for a dark pleasure, by a place beyond our senses, by the Dark Ones. I could hear the rain just outside my window, and I thought for a while, thought about my life, my old friends, thought about existence, the meaning of things, rationality, justification, absolution. I thought about some of my most treasured memories, being out on the lake with the sun hung high above the clouds, shimmering warm. I thought about my friends, who I had not seen in so long. A beautiful girl in a blue blouse with baby blue slippers, her blonde wavy hair, and those gripping steel blue eyes looking at me with penetrative force, stealing my heart but also my mind, and eventually, my life. The rain always calmed me, and I'm lucky it came on this day. It was as good a day as ever to die. My appointment with God was coming soon, and with it, a dark secret put to rest. And right before they took me out of my cell to have one final talk with the minister before being sent to the chair, The word absolution came back to mind. The Reverend's name is Thomas Bastian. His eyes, face have always been familiar to me. Call me crazy, and you might be onto something, but I've felt I've known him for a long time. His hairline, unlike his reputation, precedes him. Sitting down at a table set for two, him and I, looking down at the cross hanging from his neck, I wonder. I almost can't look him in the eyes, but he speaks. "Michael, it's been far too long. Have you been reading?" Last time I spoke to him was months ago. He'd given me a small Bible, the ones people on the street might hand you, as cheap as they are, usually just the New Testament along with the Book of Psalms. "Yes, Father," I lied. "Good," he said. "I was thinking about you, praying, my wife and I. Have you been praying?" "Yes," another lie. "And I've been thinking about forgiveness. Do you believe in forgiveness?" His face begets a smile. "Of course, and God forgives like no other. May I remind you of the thief crucified along Christ? Dismas, who proclaimed Christ the Son of God? I'm sure you've read that from the book I gave you. I interjected as the conversation was taking a tangent. I wanted to get to the root of my visitation with the man. Time was running out. "Do you believe you can forgive?" Confused, he said, "I'm not sure I understand. I've forgiven a lot of things, a great many things, indeed. Life is too short not to forgive. Those stuck in the past are doomed to repeat it." I was giving him a temp check, and I was afraid. I find it silly I was afraid, considering the things I've done. A man like me has nothing to be afraid of but himself. My decision surely proved that. I've killed plenty of men, women, sons and daughters, torn families apart, turned wives to widows, husbands to drunks. This was my chance to make it right. I still wasn't looking at him when I asked, "What's the greatest thing you've ever forgiven?" His body tensed hard. He bore a hand against his cross in thought, the other clenched in a fist and resting on the table between us. Momentarily, I could feel his thoughts like some magnetic field. A vestige of a memory came to his mind, and he said, "My daughter Abigail, she went missing back in 2009. Short and sweet. I understood. I saw her again in that soft blue blouse, pulling it up above her knees as she danced in the creek, unaware of the futility of life. I had no control over my urges, and I'd made a mistake. Out of them all, that was the one. I thought of absolution again, and finally looked into his eyes. "Can you forgive me, Father?"